Today, we're digging into an idea that sounds like it's straight out of science fiction. What if the raw ingredients for life on Earth weren't actually made here at all, but were delivered by some kind of cosmic delivery service? I mean, think about it. This is the ultimate mystery, right? For as long as we've been able to think, we've looked at the world, we've looked up at the stars, and we've asked ourselves, where did all of this come from? How did that very first spark of life get going on what was once a barren, rocky planet? Now, the answer you probably learned in school is that life just cooked itself up in some kind of primordial soup right here on Earth. But there's another idea, a much older one, called panspermia. And panspermia suggests that the key ingredients for life weren't homemade. Nope, they were delivered from outer space, hitching a ride on asteroids and meteorites across the unbelievable emptiness of the cosmos. But, that idea immediately brings up a huge question. If life was delivered, what exactly was in the package? For a long time, there have really only been two main theories. But as you're about to see, both of them have some pretty big problems. So on one hand, you've got the idea of organism seeds. We're talking fully formed microbes. The problem? They're way too fragile. It's really unlikely they could survive a trip through deep space and then somehow adapt to a brand new world. Then, on the other hand, you have molecule seeds, just the basic building blocks, like amino acids. These are definitely tough enough to survive the journey, but they might just be too simple to reliably kickstart something as complex as life. It's a massive leap to go from just a pile of parts to a living, functioning cell. So both of the classic ideas kind of fall short. It feels like we're missing a key piece of the puzzle. But what if there was a third option? A middle ground that, solves the problems of the other two? Well, back in 2022, a research paper proposed exactly that. They call it a material-based panspermia hypothesis, and it's basically a Goldilocks solution. Not too complex, not too simple, but just right. Okay, so here's the key idea. The seed isn't a living thing, and it's not just a loose bag of molecules either. It's what scientists are calling a material-based panspermia seed, or MBPS for short. The best way to think about it is like a prepackaged self-assembling kit. It's made of these special polymer gels that are tough enough for space travel, but are also designed to spring into action the second they hit water. And here's a direct quote from that paper that really got this new way of thinking started. These scientists are proposing a whole new kind of seed that could finally bridge that huge gap between simple chemistry and complex life. Now, a self-assembling kit delivered from space sounds fantastic, I know, but how would it actually work? Well, the science behind it is surprisingly straightforward and honestly pretty elegant. This whole process has 5 main steps. First, these special prebiotic polymers. Think of them as long-chain molecules, like polyester gels that could have formed naturally before life even began. They form on some other planet. Second, a massive asteroid impact blasts this material out into space. Third, this polymer seed travels across the solar system for who knows how long. Fourth, it lands on a new world, like the early Earth, and hopefully splashes down in an ocean or a lake. And then, here's the magic part, step 5. The second it hits water, the gel automatically self-assembles into tiny, functional microdroplets. And this is what's happening on the molecular level. You start with simple molecules, you heat them up to form these long polymer chains, and then you just add water. Almost instantly, they organize themselves into these incredible cell-like microdroplets. It's literally like a flat-pack kit for the origin of life that builds itself with just a splash water. And that's why it's the perfect Goldilocks seed. It's tough enough to travel, but complex enough to get things started once it arrives. And get this, these aren't just passive little blobs. They have these amazing functions that are a lot like early cells. They can exchange materials with their environment, pulling in useful chemicals. They can actually move around. They can merge together, coalesce, and combine their contents. They can protect other delicate molecules inside of them. And critically, they provide a basic scaffold for evolution to start working on. A starting point from which more complex things, like the membranes of actual cells, could eventually form. Okay, so this all sounds incredibly promising, but it's really important to remember, this is still a hypothesis. And to get from a great idea to a proven reality, scientists have to tackle some major hurdles. And the biggest question of all really comes down to sheer survival. I mean, space is one of the most hostile environments we can possibly imagine. So could these elegant self-assembling kits actually make it from one planet to another in one piece? The research paper is really upfront about these challenges.
First, you've got constant degradation from space radiation. Then there's the fiery entry through an atmosphere, with temperatures hitting over 1,300 degrees Celsius. That's hotter than lava. Even if it survives that, it has to somehow withstand the massive shock of impact. And maybe the biggest hurdle of all is the timescale. This journey could take millions of years, far, far longer than any experiment we could ever hope to run.
But here's where it takes a fascinating twist. This research isn't just about figuring out our own ancient past. The paper actually suggests that if we can understand and maybe even engineer these material-based seeds, we could create our own directed panspermia. It could become a blueprint for kickstarting life on other worlds, a process we call terraforming. So we're left with this really profound question. What if the original blueprint for life wasn't some complex, delicate cell? What if it was something far simpler and way more durable? A cosmic just-add-water kit, just waiting, maybe for millions of years, to land in the right place and start building life from the ground up. It's an idea that could completely change how we search for life, not just here, but everywhere across the universe.